Long before fire fell from heaven, before the whirlwind, and before the still, small voice, there was silence. A spiritual drought had settled over Israel, a land not just dry from lack of rain, but dry of truth, justice, and reverence for the Lord. The people had turned, the covenant was forgotten, and the throne of Israel was now ruled by Ahab, a king who did more evil than all before him. Beside him stood Jezebel, cunning, ruthless, and determined to silence the voice of Yahweh forever. Together, they led Israel into darkness. Baal worship thrived, prophets were hunted, altars of the Lord lay broken. Then from the wilderness he appeared, a man whose name would shake the heavens, Elijah the Tishbite. There is no grand introduction, no royal lineage, no mighty army, only a man wrapped in rough garments with eyes full of fire and words that burned. He stepped into Ahab's court, a place of gold, idolatry, and rebellion, and spoke with the authority of heaven itself. As the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, except at my word. Then he vanished. His voice echoed in the chambers of the palace, but his message echoed louder in the skies. The rain stopped, the skies closed, the land began to wither. The judgment had begun. God sent Elijah into hiding, not out of fear, but for preparation. By the brook Cherith, east of the Jordan, he drank from the stream. Ravens, unclean birds by law, brought him bread and meat, morning and evening. The God who shut the heavens still provided. But as days passed, the brook dried. The land was groaning, and so was Elijah. He was not just a prophet. He was becoming a weapon in God's hand. God then led him north, outside of Israel, to a widow in Zarephath, in enemy territory, a poor woman gathering sticks to prepare one last meal for herself and her son. Yet Elijah asked her to make bread for him first. It seemed cruel, until the miracle came. The jar of flour shall not be used up, nor shall the jug of oil run dry, until the day the Lord sends rain on the earth. And it was so. Each day, enough each day, a silent testimony that Yahweh was still the God of life. Even in a land of death, Elijah stayed there, hidden and learning, not just how to confront kings, but how to trust in silence, obey in obscurity, and walk by faith in famine. Then the boy, the widow's son, fell sick and died. The woman's hope was gone. Elijah carried the lifeless child to the upper room, cried out to God, stretched himself over the child 3 times and pleaded, "O Lord my God, let this child's soul come back to him." And the child breathed again. This was no longer just a prophet. This was a man who could stand between death and life, a man who had seen the drought, the provision, and now the resurrection. But the story was just beginning. In the next chapter, Elijah would walk back into the heart of Israel, not with fear, but with fire. 3 years passed. 3 years without rain, 3 years of cracked soil, starving flocks, and empty altars. Israel was desperate, but still unrepentant. Baal had not answered. His priests still danced, but the skies remained silent. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah. "Go, present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth." Elijah rose. He walked straight into enemy territory, into Samaria, the heart of idolatry. There he met Obadiah, a righteous man who feared the Lord but served under Ahab. Elijah gave him a message. "Tell your master, Elijah is here." It was time for a confrontation. Ahab arrived, filled with rage. "Is that you, O troubler of Israel?" But Elijah did not flinch. "I have not troubled Israel, you have. You and your father's house have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed Baal." And then came the challenge. "Gather all Israel to Mount Carmel. Bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah. Let them meet me there." The day came. Mount Carmel towered above the land, a high place often claimed by false gods. Now it would become the stage for the living God. The people gathered, confused, afraid, divided, and Elijah stood before them all and cried, "How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him." Silence. So Elijah gave the term, "Let 2 bulls be given. Let the prophets of Baal choose one and prepare it. I will take the other. Then we will each call upon our God, and the God who answers by fire. He is God." The prophets of Baal built their altar. They shouted, they danced, they cut themselves, from morning until noon. But there was no voice, no answer, no fire. Elijah watched, and then he mocked. "Shout louder. Maybe he's meditating, or sleeping, or on a journey." They screamed louder, but Baal remained silent. Then Elijah rebuilt the altar of the Lord, the one that had been torn down. He took 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. Though divided, though scattered, their names still mattered. He laid the wood, cut the bull, and then he drenched it all with water 3 times until the trench overflowed. Then he prayed, not for show, not for power, but for hearts. "Let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and I am your servant. Answer me, Lord, so these people will know that you, O Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again." And the fire fell. It consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the water, the very dust beneath. The people fell on their faces and cried, "The Lord, He is God! The Lord, He is God!" The prophets of Baal were seized and judged. Elijah stood alone, but not afraid. And as the smoke rose, so did the hope of Israel. But the story was not over. The sky was still dry, the land still cracked, and Elijah would have to pray until the rain returned. Elijah climbed back to the top of Mount Carmel. He bowed low, his face between his knees, and prayed. He sent his servant to look toward the sea. "Nothing," the servant said. Elijah prayed again, and again, and again, 7 times, until finally the servant cried out, "A cloud, as small as a man's hand, rising from the sea." That was enough. Elijah stood, the wind stirring, and turned to his servant. "Go, tell Ahab, prepare your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." And the sky turned black. Thunder rolled over the hills. Lightning flashed. And the drought broke. Rain poured down on the parched land, a sign not just of mercy, but of revival. But Elijah did not stop. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and he ran, faster than Ahab's chariot, all the way to Jezreel. The hand of God was upon him. The fire had fallen, the rain had returned, but the spiritual war was far from over. Jezebel, furious, sent a message to Elijah. "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I do not make your life like one of them." Elijah, the prophet who had called down fire and shut the heavens, ran. He ran into the wilderness. He ran from the threat. He ran in fear. The strength that once sustained him was now gone. Under a solitary broom tree, Elijah collapsed and prayed, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take my life." He was broken, exhausted, done. The mighty prophet, crushed beneath the weight of fear and fatigue, wanted to die. But God didn't reply with thunder. He replied with tenderness. An angel touched him, gave him bread, gave him water, and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey is too much for you." Strengthened by that simple meal, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights through the wilderness, all the way to Mount Horeb, the very mountain where God had once spoken to Moses. There he found a cave, and he hid, alone, silent, waiting. Then the word of the Lord came to him. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And Elijah poured out his heart. I have been very zealous for the Lord, but the Israelites have rejected your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets. I am the only one left, and now they're trying to kill me too." But God did not answer with wrath. He told Elijah to stand on the mountain because the Lord was about to pass by. First came a great and powerful wind, tearing through the mountains, but the Lord was not in the wind. Then came an earthquake, shaking the rocks beneath his feet, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Then came a fire, blazing, fierce, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still, small voice, a whisper, not loud, not dramatic, but full of presence. That's where Elijah found God, not in spectacle, but in stillness. The Lord said, "Go back the way you came. I still have 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal and whose mouths have not kissed him." Elijah was not alone. The mission was not over. The silence was not abandonment. It was refining. And God gave him a new mission. Anoint kings, raise up Elisha, prepare the next generation. Elijah had learned to call fire from heaven, but now he had learned something greater, to recognize the voice of God in the whisper. Years passed. Elijah's hair had grayed, his steps were slower, but his spirit remained fierce, anchored in a faith refined by fire, famine, fear, and whisper. He had seen kings rise and fall. He had confronted idolatry, trained prophets, and anointed his successor, Elisha, the one who would carry the mantle when he was gone. But Elijah was not going to die. The time had come. The Lord was about to take him, not through death, but through glory, and somehow Elijah knew. He walked with Elisha from Gilgal, saying, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Bethel." But Elisha replied, "As the Lord lives, and as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So together they went. At Bethel, the prophets approached Elisha. "Do you know that the Lord is going to take your master from you today?" Elisha nodded. "Yes, I know, be silent." But Elijah was not done walking. He turned again. "Stay here, Elisha. The Lord has sent me to Jericho." And again Elisha replied, "As the Lord lives and as you live, I will not leave you." And so it went, to Jericho, then finally to the Jordan River. There Elijah took off his cloak, struck the waters, and they parted, just like the Red Sea before Moses. Together, the two prophets walked across on dry ground. Then Elijah turned to Elisha. "Ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you." And Elisha answered boldly, "Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit." Elijah looked into his eyes and said, "You have asked a hard thing, but if you see me when I am taken from you, it shall be so." And suddenly, the heavens split. A chariot of fire with horses of fire descended between them. A whirlwind roared across the valley. Elijah was lifted, not in death, but in glory, carried into heaven in the very flames he once called down. Elisha cried out, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But Elijah was gone. Only his cloak remained, the mantle fallen to the ground. Elisha picked it up. He walked back to the Jordan. He struck the waters with Elijah's cloak and said, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And the river parted again. Elijah's spirit lived on. Elijah's story does not end in the Old Testament. Centuries later, on another mountain, during the transfiguration of Jesus, Elijah would appear again, standing beside Moses, shining in glory, speaking with the Messiah, still alive, still faithful, still part of the story. Because Elijah was more than a prophet, he was a forerunner. And one day, the spirit of Elijah would rise again, preparing the way of the Lord, turning the hearts of the fathers to the children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the just, until the final day when the heavens split once more and the King returns in glory.